I'm Olivia Richards, 26 years old, and I never thought being hit by a car would be less painful than what my family did to me. The beeping monitors faded into background noise as I waited for my parents to burst through the hospital door. But they never came. "We can't. Our other daughter is walking her dog," they told the doctor who called about my critical condition. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe so you don't miss what I did after finding my inner strength. Growing up in suburban Connecticut in our spacious colonial home with its perfectly trimmed hedges and two-car garage, I thought we were the picture-perfect American family. My parents, Linda and Robert Richards, had successful careers. Mom, as a real estate agent, and Dad as a financial advisor. We never struggled financially, took yearly vacations to Florida, and had all the trappings of upper-middle-class life. But beneath that polished exterior was a deeply unbalanced family dynamic that took me years to fully recognize. My sister Jessica was 3 years older than me, and from my earliest memories, she was the undisputed favorite. Jessica wasn't particularly exceptional at anything, average grades, no special talents, but she had mastered the art of demanding attention. When she turned 24, my parents gifted her a purebred Siberian husky named Apollo that cost more than my entire college. Textbook budget for the year. From the moment that fluffy white and gray puppy entered our home, he became the third favorite ahead of me. Apollo wasn't just a pet, he was treated like royalty. Jessica's attachment to him went beyond normal pet ownership. She dressed him in designer dog clothes, took him to specialized doggy daycare 3 times a week, and even hired a personal chef to prepare his meals. My parents found all of this endearing rather than concerning, and they enabled it at every turn. "Apollo doesn't like the sound of your voice when you sing," Jessica complained once when I was practicing for my high school choir concert. Instead of supporting my passion, my mother asked me to practice silently or go somewhere else so Apollo wouldn't be disturbed. The pattern of being overlooked wasn't new, but it intensified with Apollo's arrival. When I graduated top of my class in high school, my parents missed the ceremony because Apollo had a grooming appointment they couldn't reschedule. I stood alone after the ceremony, watching my classmates take photos with their proud families, holding back tears as I clutched my honors cords. "We're so sorry we missed it, sweetie," my mother said later that evening, not looking up from her phone where she was scrolling through photos Jessica had sent of Apollo's fresh haircut. "But you know how important Apollo's coat maintenance is, especially in summer." My athletic achievements went similarly unnoticed. I broke 2 school records in swimming, but my trophies were relegated to a box in the attic because Apollo gets anxious around shiny objects. Meanwhile, the living room mantel displayed framed photos of Apollo at various dog parks. The contrast in financial support was even more striking. When it came time for college, I received minimal help despite being accepted to Cornell with a partial scholarship. "We need to be practical about expenses," Dad explained as I filled out student loan applications. That same month, they approved Jessica's request to remodel our basement into what she called Apollo's Wellness Center, complete with custom flooring, climate control, and a specialized sound system playing music composed specifically for canine anxiety. During my sophomore year of college, I came home for Christmas break with an important portfolio containing printed materials for a major class presentation due when I returned. Apollo destroyed it while everyone was eating dinner, shredding weeks of work into confetti. When I became upset, I was the one who got scolded. "He's just a dog, Olivia. He doesn't understand. You should have put your things away properly." My father reprimanded me as Jessica cooed and comforted Apollo, who had apparently been traumatized by my reaction. I spent my entire break redoing the project in a local coffee shop because the house was too chaotic. The summer after my junior year, my parents planned a week-long family trip to the Grand Canyon, something I'd been looking forward to for months. 2 days before departure, Apollo developed a mild stomach upset. The entire vacation was canceled immediately. "We can't possibly leave Apollo when he's not feeling well," Mom declared. as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. I had already taken unpaid time off from my summer job at a marketing firm, time I couldn't get back. That week, instead of seeing one of nature's wonders, I sat alone in my room listening to Jessica give hourly updates on Apollo's bowel movements to my attentive parents. After graduating with honors in marketing and communications, I found a good job in Hartford and moved into a small but expensive apartment, determined to be financially independent despite my student loan burden. I stretched every dollar, sometimes choosing between groceries or electricity in the tightest months, while watching Jessica post photos of Apollo's birthday parties where my parents spared no expense. My therapist, Dr. Evans, helped me start processing these dynamics during our weekly sessions. "What you're describing sounds like a clear pattern of favoritism," she noted during one session. "How does that make you feel when you're overlooked for a pet?" "Invisible," I answered honestly. "Like I'm not even part of the family sometimes." My closest friend and coworker, Maya Thompson, was the first person outside therapy who truly saw the unfairness. After witnessing my parents cancel lunch plans with me because Apollo had a vet checkup, she was furious. "That's not normal, Olivia. Dogs don't take precedence over children," she insisted, her brown eyes flashing with indignation on my behalf. But despite everything, I still harbored hope that someday I'd earn their approval, their love, their attention. I kept trying, kept achieving, kept reaching out. Each time my parents canceled plans or dismissed my accomplishments, I told myself that next time would be different. Next time, they would see me. Next time, they would care. I couldn't have known then how wrong I was, or that it would take nearly losing my life to finally see the truth. After 3 years at Hartford Marketing Partners, my hard work was finally paying off. I'd been selected as one of 2 candidates for promotion to senior marketing director, a position that would nearly double my salary and give me the financial breathing room I desperately needed. The final step was presenting my vision for the company's biggest client to the executive team at a formal dinner. This was my moment, the culmination of countless late nights and sacrificed weekends. For once, I wanted my parents to witness my success, to see that despite their lack of support, I was thriving. I called them 3 weeks in advance to invite them to the presentation dinner. "That sounds wonderful, honey," my mother said with unusual enthusiasm. "Your father and I would love to be there. Just text us the details." Her positive response lifted my spirits enormously. Maybe things were changing. Maybe they were finally seeing me as an adult with accomplishments worth celebrating. I spent the next 2 weeks refining my presentation, imagining my parents' proud faces as I confidently addressed the room of executives. Then, 4 days before the big night, Jessica called an emergency family meeting via group text. When I arrived at my parents' house that evening, Jessica was pacing the living room, her expression grave while Apollo lounged on his custom orthopedic dog bed, which occupied more space than the couch. "Apollo is showing signs of depression," Jessica announced dramatically. "His dog therapist says he needs more family support and engagement. I've scheduled intensive family therapy sessions for him starting this Thursday at 6. Thursday at 6. The exact time of my presentation dinner. "Jessica, I told you both about my presentation weeks ago," I said, looking desperately between my parents. "This is really important for my career." My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. "Honey, Apollo needs us right now. Mental health is so important. Even for dogs. Surely your work people will understand." "It's Apollo's emotional well-being, Olivia," Jessica added, as if explaining something to a child. "He needs his whole family there. Your work thing can probably be rescheduled, right?" My father patted my shoulder awkwardly. "We're really sorry about this conflict, sweetheart. But you know how sensitive Apollo is. He's been part of this family for 5 years. And I've been part of this family for 26 years, I replied, my voice barely steady. The awkward silence that followed was answer enough. Apollo trumped me. Again. I drove home that night with tears blurring my vision, but also with a new determination forming. I would give this presentation with or without my family's support. I would succeed despite them, not because of them. The morning of my presentation, I woke up feeling strangely calm. I dressed in my most professional outfit, a charcoal gray suit with a silk blouse, and rehearsed my talking points one final time before heading to the office. Throughout the day, I received encouraging texts from Maya and other coworkers, but nothing from my family. At 5:30, I stood in the bathroom of the upscale restaurant where the dinner was being held, giving myself a final pep talk in the mirror. "You don't need them here," I whispered to my reflection. "You've done this on your own all along." The presentation went better than I could have imagined. I spoke confidently, answered challenging questions thoughtfully, and even managed to inject appropriate humor that had the CEO laughing. By the time dessert was served, I could tell from the executive team's expressions and questions that I had impressed them. "Exceptional work, Olivia," Martin Clark, the CEO, told me as the evening wound down. "This is exactly the kind of forward thinking we need at the senior level." My colleagues insisted on celebratory drinks afterward at a nearby bar. For a few hours, surrounded by people who valued my contributions, I almost forgot about my family's absence. Maya raised her glass in a toast. "To Olivia, who's going to absolutely kill it as our new senior director." Everyone cheered, and I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. This was my moment, and I had earned it entirely on my own merit. It was nearly 11 when I left the bar, declining Maya's offer to share an Uber. "I need the fresh air," I told her, though in truth I needed time alone to process the complex emotions of the evening. It had started raining lightly, and the streets glistened under the streetlights. I walked slowly, replaying the successful presentation in my mind, wondering if my parents had even thought about me once during their dog therapy session. Would they ask how it went? Would they care? Lost in thought, I approached a crosswalk. The walk signal was illuminated, and I stepped off the curb, my mind still tangled in questions about why my own parents couldn't love me enough to show up for one important night. I never saw the car that ran the red light. There was a screech of tires on wet pavement, a blinding flash of headlights, and a sickening thud as 2 tons of metal collided with my body. I felt myself flying through the air in terrible slow motion, strangely aware of my purse and phone scattering across the intersection. People were screaming. Someone was kneeling beside me, telling me not to move. Rain fell on my face, mixing with something warm and metallic tasting. Pain blossomed everywhere at once, overwhelming in its intensity. "Call an ambulance," someone shouted. "She's badly hurt." As sirens wailed in the distance, a strange thought floated through my fading consciousness. Will they come this time? Will this finally be enough to make them care? Then darkness claimed me, and I knew nothing more. Beeping machines, an antiseptic smell. These were the first sensations that filtered through the fog as I drifted back to consciousness. My eyelids felt impossibly heavy, but I managed to force them open. Harsh fluorescent lighting made me wince as a blurry figure in scrubs approached my bedside. "Welcome back," said a gentle female voice. "I'm Andrea, your nurse. Try not to move too much, honey." I tried to speak, but found a tube in my throat. Panic surged until Andrea's calm voice broke through. "You're on a ventilator to help you breathe. You've been unconscious for about 48 hours. You're in the ICU at Hartford Memorial. You were in an accident." Memories flashed in fragments. Rain, headlights, pain. I blinked slowly, trying to communicate my understanding. "You have serious injuries," Andrea continued, checking my vitals. "Multiple broken ribs, a punctured lung, head trauma, and fractures in your right leg. You've already had 2 surgeries, and the doctors are monitoring you closely." My eyes darted around the room, searching for any sign of family presence, flowers, cards, personal items. Nothing but sterile medical equipment surrounded me. "Dr. Patel will be in shortly to explain everything in more detail," Andrea said, seemingly reading my thoughts. Your emergency contact was notified when you were brought in. Later that day, after the breathing tube was removed and I could speak in a raspy whisper, I learned the full extent of what had happened. Dr. Patel, a kind-faced man with salt and pepper hair, stood at the foot of my bed, reviewing my chart. You're very lucky to be alive, Ms. Richards, he said solemnly. The impact could have been fatal if the car had been traveling just slightly faster. My parents, I managed to croak. Are they here? A flicker of something? Discomfort? Concern? Crossed the doctor's face. Before he could respond, voices drifted in from the hallway just outside my door. We've called her parents multiple times, a male voice said in hushed tones. When we first contacted them the night she was brought in, I personally spoke with her mother. What did they say? Another voice asked. I explained that her condition was critical, that there were potential complications that could arise, and that, frankly, tonight might be her last if those complications occurred. Her mother's exact words were, "We can't come right now. Our other daughter is walking her dog and needs emotional support." A shocked silence followed before the second voice responded. They chose a dog walk over potentially saying goodbye to their dying daughter? Apparently so. I've been practicing medicine for 20 years, and I've never heard anything quite like it. Hot tears leaked from the corners of my eyes as the conversation confirmed what some part of me had always known but refused to accept. I would never be a priority to my own parents. Dr. Patel noticed my tears and quickly approached. Ms. Richards, are you in pain? I can adjust your medication. I shook my head, slightly. I heard, I whispered, about my parents. His expression softened with compassion. I'm very sorry. Sometimes in crisis, people don't respond as we hope they would. Perhaps they didn't fully understand the gravity of the situation. But I understood perfectly. Apollo's evening walk took precedence over my life. The days that followed were a blur of pain, treatments, and loneliness. Each morning, Andrea would arrive for her shift and check the visitor's log before entering my room. Each morning, her smile would falter slightly when she found it empty of my family's names. My phone, retrieved from the accident scene and charged by hospital staff, showed dozens of messages from coworkers expressing concern and well wishes. Maya had visited twice, bringing essential items and company, but not a single text or call from my parents or Jessica appeared among the notifications. On the third day, the hospital social worker Jennifer Davis came to see me. With her clipboard and gentle questioning, she tried to understand my family situation. Is there anyone else we should contact for you? She asked after I explained the basics of my family dynamics. No, I replied, the word hanging heavy in the sterile air. There's no one else. On day 4, my condition worsened unexpectedly. An infection had developed around one of my surgical sites, requiring additional emergency surgery and powerful antibiotics. Through the haze of fever and pain, I imagined my parents finally rushing to my side, finally realizing what they stood to lose. The fantasy sustained me through the worst night. But morning came, and with it, Andrea's sad headshake when I asked if anyone had called. Later that day, my phone rang with Jessica's ringtone. My heart leapt as I fumbled to answer it with my IV-tethered hand. Jessica, hi, I said, my voice embarrassingly eager. Hey, Olivia, she replied casually, as if I wasn't lying in a hospital bed fighting infection. Sorry to hear about your accident. That sounds rough. Yeah, it's been pretty serious, I said, waiting for her to say they were on their way. So, anyway, she continued without acknowledging my comment, I just wanted to let you know that Apollo got these amazing new therapeutic toys that help with his anxiety. The specialist says they're revolutionary. I posted some videos on Instagram. You should check them out if you're bored in the hospital. The conversation continued for another 3 minutes, entirely about Apollo, before Jessica abruptly announced she had to go because it was time for Apollo's afternoon walk. Not once did she ask about my condition or mention our parents planning to visit. After hanging up, I stared at the ceiling for a long time, something shifting fundamentally inside me. The hurt was transforming into something harder, sharper. Anger began to replace the lifelong sadness of hoping for love that never came. Physical therapy started on day 5, excruciatingly painful sessions that left me drenched in sweat and tears. The therapist, Brian, pushed me just enough. "You're doing amazingly well for someone with your injuries," he encouraged as I struggled to complete the simplest movements. "I don't have a choice," I replied through gritted teeth. "No one's going to do this for me." Something in my tone made Brian look at me more closely. "That's true for all of us ultimately," he said thoughtfully. "But it takes some people longer to realize it than others." By the 6th day, I was able to take a few steps with a walker, each movement sending shards of pain through my body. Yet with each painful step, my resolve strengthened. I began thinking beyond mere physical recovery. I started planning what would come after. Andrea had become more than just my nurse. She was my advocate and confidant. During her night shifts, she would sit with me during her breaks, sharing stories about her own difficult family and how she had created a chosen family that truly supported her. "Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away," she told me on the evening of day 6. "It doesn't mean you don't love them. It means you finally decided to love yourself more." That night, I made a decision that would change the course of my life forever. On the morning of day 7, I was attempting to feed myself breakfast one-handed when Andrea rushed into my room, her expression troubled. "Your family is here," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "All of them." Before I could process this information, the door swung open wider, and there they were. Mom, Dad, Jessica, and, impossibly, Apollo, wearing a vest with therapy dog emblazoned on it, though I knew he had no such training. "Oh, sweetie, look at you," my mother said, approaching the bed while juggling a bouquet of dog-shaped balloons. No flowers, no get-well card, just balloon dogs with "Feel better woof soon" printed on them. I was momentarily speechless, caught between my lifelong desire for their presence and the new reality I'd begun to accept during their absence. "Parking here is ridiculous," Jessica complained, letting Apollo jump up onto the foot of my hospital bed without asking. "We had to walk like 10 minutes from the garage. Apollo's paws are probably sore now." Dad hung back by the door, looking uncomfortable. "You look better than we expected," he offered awkwardly. "When exactly were you expecting to see how I looked?" I asked quietly. "I've been here for a week." An uncomfortable silence fell before Mom jumped in brightly. "Well, we're here now, and look who we brought to cheer you up." She gestured toward Apollo as if presenting a celebrity guest. "Why didn't you come sooner?" The question escaped before I could stop it, my voice small but steady. Mom and Dad exchanged glances. "Well, honey, it's been a very difficult time," Mom explained, straightening her designer scarf. "Apollo has been experiencing severe separation anxiety ever since your accident. We think he somehow sensed something was wrong with a family member. I was unconscious and on a ventilator," I said flatly. "The doctor told you I might not survive the night." Jessica rolled her eyes. "Don't be so dramatic, Olivia. Clearly you're fine." "I'm not fine," I replied, gesturing to the machines monitoring. "My vital signs, the casts, the IVs. I nearly died. I had 3 surgeries. I've been fighting infection and pain, alone." "We would have come if it was truly life or death," Dad said defensively. But Apollo was having a real crisis. He wouldn't eat, wouldn't play with his favorite, toys. The dog behaviorist said he needed consistent family support. I stared at my father, truly seeing him for perhaps the first time. "I needed family support. I'm your daughter." "You've always been so independent," Mom replied with a dismissive, Apollo is sensitive. He needs us more." For the next 30 minutes, The conversation revolved entirely around Apollo's emotional state, Jessica's challenges in managing his anxiety, and how difficult the past week had been for them. Not once did they ask about my recovery, my pain, or my emotional well-being. Jessica took out her phone and positioned herself next to my bed. "Let's take some pictures for Instagram. Everyone's been so worried." "Worried about who?" I asked. "About all of us," Jessica replied, as if it were obvious. "People keep asking how Apollo is coping with the family stress." My mother smoothed her hair and leaned in for the photo while Dad awkwardly stood behind them. Apollo remained on my bed, his weight sending spikes of pain through my injured leg. "Smile, Olivia," Jessica directed. "You look terrible. Try to look more upbeat for social media." After the impromptu photo session, Mom checked her watch. "We should get going soon. Apollo has his grooming appointment at 3 and we can't be late. They charge a rescheduling fee." "You're leaving?" I asked, unable to mask my disbelief. "You just got here after a week." "It's not like you were actually dying," Mom said with a shrug. "The doctors were obviously being dramatic to make us rush over." Something inside me shattered. Not my heart, which had been breaking slowly for 26 years, but the chains of hope and expectation that had kept me bound to these people, who clearly did not love me in any meaningful way. "Get out," I whispered. "Excuse me," Dad said, frowning. "Get out of my room. All of you." My voice grew stronger with each word. "You chose a dog over your critically injured daughter. You decided that Apollo's walk was more important than potentially saying goodbye to me if I died. You waited a week to visit me for 30 minutes and now you're leaving for a grooming appointment." "Olivia, you're being unreasonable," Mom began, her tone condescending. "No, I'm finally seeing clearly," I interrupted. "I have spent my entire life trying to earn your love while you gave it freely to Jessica and now to her dog. I've achieved and accomplished and excelled, hoping you would notice, hoping you would care. But you don't, and you never will." Jessica scoffed. "This is exactly why we prioritize Apollo. He gives unconditional love, unlike you with all your demands and drama." "My demand was for my parents to visit me in the hospital when I almost died," I replied, my voice steady despite the tears streaming down my face. "If that's too much to ask, then we have nothing more to say to each other." "You don't mean that," Dad said uncertainly. "You're upset and on medication." "I've never meant anything more clearly in my life," I told him. "Please leave now." "Apollo can't be late for his appointment." They gathered their things in awkward silence, my mother's face pinched with disapproval, my father avoiding eye contact, Jessica muttering about ingratitude. Apollo was the last to leave my bed, jumping down, with a casual disregard for my injuries that perfectly mirrored his owner's attitude. "When you've calmed down and are thinking more rationally, give us a call," Mom said from the doorway, as if I were a toddler having a tantrum. The door closed behind them, and for several minutes I sat in perfect stillness, tears flowing freely, but silently. Then a strange sensation began to bubble up from deep within. Not more pain, but something that felt unexpectedly like relief. Andrea entered the room cautiously, having given my family's visit privacy, but clearly having heard enough to understand what had transpired. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, approaching my bedside. "No," I answered honestly, "but I think I'm going to be." That night became a turning point. Between bouts of emotional breakdown and moments of startling clarity, I formulated a plan. If my family couldn't see my worth, I would need to build a life where I was surrounded by people who did. Andrea sat with me well beyond her shift, helping me think through logistics. "What if I just disappeared?" I said at one point, the idea taking shape. "What if I walked away so completely that they had to notice my absence?" "You could," Andrea nodded thoughtfully. "But do it for yourself, not to make them notice. Do it because you deserve better." By morning, my plan had solidified. I would need to act quickly, while I still had the courage of my convictions. I asked Andrea to connect me with the hospital social worker again. Jennifer arrived promptly, bringing with her resources I hadn't known existed, support networks for people estranged from family, information about changing contact details, even affordable housing options in cities a few hours away. "You wouldn't be the first person to need a fresh start," she told me kindly. "And you certainly won't be the last." The day passed in a flurry of quiet planning. I contacted my bank to ensure my accounts were secure and accessible remotely. I emailed my landlord about breaking my lease due to medical circumstances. I reached out to trusted coworkers about the possibility of working remotely during my recovery. Dr. Kevin Chen, my attending physician, was initially concerned when I broached the subject of leaving. "Medically speaking, you should remain under observation for at least another week," he advised. "And emotionally speaking?" I asked. His expression softened. "Emotional health impacts physical recovery significantly. If your current situation is detrimental to your emotional well-being." "It is," I confirmed. He nodded slowly. "Then we'll work with you to make your transition as safe as possible, medically speaking." That evening, using Andrea's phone to avoid any trace on my own, I arranged for a small apartment in Boston, paid the deposit from my emergency savings, and organized medical transport that would not be tracked back to my family. The final act was writing the note. Andrea brought me a sheet of hospital stationery and a pen, then left me alone to compose my last words to the family that had never truly seen me. The words flowed easily, with a clarity that surprised me. Not a tearful plea for attention or a vengeful list of grievances, but a simple statement of truth and boundaries. When I finished, I folded it neatly and handed it to Andrea for safekeeping until after my departure. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, tucking the note into her pocket. I looked around the hospital room where I had faced my darkest moments alone and found unexpected strength. I've never been more sure of anything. The next morning at 6 a.m., before the change of shift when the hospital would be at its quietest, I enacted my plan. Dr. Chen had reluctantly signed my release against medical advice after ensuring I understood all risks and had proper follow-up care arranged in Boston. A private medical transport service waited at the rear entrance, organized by Jennifer, who understood my need for discretion. Andrea helped me dress in clothes Maya had brought from my apartment and guided me into a wheelchair, mindful of my injuries. "You've got this," she whispered, squeezing my shoulder gently. As we navigated the quiet hallways, I felt a complex mixture of terror and exhilaration. Every movement sent pain shooting through my battered body, but beneath the physical discomfort was a growing sense of liberation. Andrea placed my note on the perfectly made bed after I left. The simple white paper stood starkly against the blue hospital blanket, containing all I had left to say to my family. "I've spent my life waiting for you to love me as much as you love Jessica and Apollo. I now understand that will never happen. Don't try to find me. I deserve better, and I'm going to find it. Olivia." The medical transport van was nondescript and comfortable, the driver professional and uninterested in my personal drama. For 3 hours, I watched the familiar Connecticut landscape give way to Massachusetts, each mile putting physical distance between me and the life where I had never been enough. My new apartment in Boston was small, just a studio in a converted industrial building in an up-and-coming neighborhood. The property manager, alerted to my medical condition, had arranged for basic furnishings through a local charity. A bare mattress on a simple frame, a second-hand table with 2 mismatched chairs, and a worn but clean sofa comprised my new beginning. Medical transport attendants helped me inside and ensured I was settled before departing. When the door closed behind them, I stood alone, leaning heavily on my walker, in the silent apartment, suddenly overwhelmed by the enormity of what I had done. Pain and exhaustion soon overtook the emotional tumult. I lowered myself carefully, onto the bed, not bothering to unpack my small bag of possessions, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. My first night of freedom. I awoke disoriented, momentarily panicked until the previous day's events came rushing back. Sunlight streamed through uncovered windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The complete silence was jarring after a week of constant hospital noises. No beeping machines, no intercom announcements, no nurses chatting in the hallway. Most striking was the absence of expectations. No one waiting for me to be less, to need less, to matter less. The freedom was dizzying and terrifying in equal measure. Basic survival became my first challenge. Walking the 10 steps to the bathroom required monumental effort. Preparing a simple meal from the welcome basket left by the property manager seemed like climbing Mount Everest. Each small victory, brushing my teeth without falling, making toast without burning myself, became a triumph to celebrate. That first evening alone, pain and doubt crept in as darkness fell. Had I made a terrible mistake? Was I capable of rebuilding a life from scratch while still healing from near-fatal injuries? For one moment of weakness, I considered calling my parents, crawling back to the familiar dysfunction. Instead, I pulled out my phone and called Rachel Winters, my boss at Hartford Marketing. "Olivia," she answered immediately. "Thank God. Your parents came to the office looking for you today. They said you disappeared from the hospital. Are you okay?" My heart raced at the knowledge they were already searching, but I steadied my voice. "I'm safe, Rachel. I needed to make a clean break for reasons I can't fully explain right now." There was a pause before Rachel responded. "I think I understand more than you realize. Maya filled me in on some of your family situation." Relief washed over me. "I need to know if working remotely is possible while I recover. I can't come back to Hartford right now." "Consider it done," Rachel said without hesitation. "Your promotion was confirmed the day after your presentation. The senior director position is yours, with or without a physical presence in the office." Tears of gratitude sprang to my eyes. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means to me. Just focus on healing, Olivia. The work will be here when you're ready." That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in years, despite the physical discomfort. I had employment, shelter, and most importantly, the first fragile sense of being valued for who I was. The days that followed established new rhythms. Mornings began with painful but necessary physical therapy exercises. By noon, I would work remotely for a few hours, my laptop propped on pillows as I reclined in bed. Evenings were spent researching resources for family estrangement and connecting with online support groups. 1 week into my new life, there was a knock at my door. Fear seized me. Had my family somehow found me? I peered through the peephole to see a young woman with curly red hair holding a houseplant. "Hello?" I called cautiously through the door. "Hi, I'm Charlotte from apartment 3B, came the cheerful reply. The building manager mentioned a new neighbor recovering from an accident. "Thought you might like some company and a housewarming gift." I hesitated, then slowly opened the door. Charlotte's friendly smile showed no judgment at my bruised face. "And Walker. Snake plant," she explained, holding up the potted greenery. "Impossible to kill and purifies the air. Perfect for apartment living and healing." Something about her straightforward kindness broke through my protective shell. "I'm Olivia. Would you like to come in? I don't have much to offer except tap. Water and paper cups." "Perfect," Charlotte grinned. "I'm an excellent conversationalist, especially when hydrated." That impromptu visit became the first building block of my chosen family. Charlotte, a graphic designer working from home, began checking on me daily, bringing occasional groceries and consistent friendship without prying questions about my past. 2 weeks after my escape, an anonymous package arrived containing my personal items from the hospital, things I'd had to leave behind in my hasty departure. Inside was a note in Andrea's handwriting. "Proud of you. Keep swimming." A financial reality soon imposed its harsh limitations. Despite my promotion, medical bills were mounting, and the cost of living in Boston stretched my budget to breaking point. I learned to make rice and beans last for days, to shop at discount grocery stores, and to find free entertainment through library books and public parks. My parents had taught me nothing about basic life skills. Andrea had helped me set up automatic bill payments before I left the hospital, as I'd never managed such things before. Each new skill mastered felt like reclaiming another piece of my independence. When Thanksgiving approached, the first holiday alone loomed like a specter of loneliness. Instead of wallowing, I joined an online forum for estranged family members, where someone had organized a virtual gathering for orphans by choice. From my laptop screen, I connected with dozens of others who understood the complex grief and liberation of walking away from toxic families. To setting boundaries and finding peace, we toasted with whatever drinks we had at hand, my paper cup of apple juice raising alongside their coffee mugs and wine glasses. That night, I created a new tradition for myself, writing down one thing I was truly grateful for in my new life. The freedom to heal at my own pace, I wrote in a journal Charlotte had given me. It was the first entry in what would become a chronicle of my rebuilding. December brought snow and increased pain, as my healing bones protested against the cold. But it also brought unexpected progress. My first day without using the walker, shuffling carefully around my apartment with just a cane. I celebrated by ordering delivery pizza, a luxury my budget rarely permitted. My computer chimed with an email notification as I enjoyed my small feast. The sender was Jessica, somehow having obtained my work email address. The subject line read, "Apollo misses you." My heart hammered as I debated whether to open it. Would it contain an apology? Understanding? A genuine attempt to reconnect? Clicked it open to find a single line of text. "Everyone thinks you're being selfish and dramatic. Mom cried at Christmas dinner because you weren't there to take the family photo." There was no mention of concern for my well-being, my recovery, or my future. Only how my absence had inconvenienced them. I closed the email without responding and blocked the address. Another step toward freedom. By January, I had established connections with a local support group for survivors of family trauma. Meeting weekly in a community center just 3 blocks from my apartment, a walkable distance even with my cane, I found strength in shared stories and collective healing. "Family is who shows up," said Tasha, a 40-year-old teacher who had cut ties with her emotionally abusive parents a decade earlier. "Blood means nothing if it comes with poison." With each passing week, the grip of my former life loosened. I stopped checking social media for updates on my family. I changed my phone number to one with a Boston area code. I began introducing myself to new acquaintances without the weight of shame and inadequacy that had always colored my self-perception. Was becoming someone new, or perhaps more accurately, uncovering who I had always been beneath the layers of family dysfunction. 6 months after my escape, Boston had transformed from a hiding place into a home. My studio apartment now reflected my emerging sense of self, walls painted a soft blue, by Charlotte and 2 other neighbors who had become friends, bookshelves filled with titles I'd always wanted to read, and artwork chosen solely because it spoke to me rather than matching anyone else's taste. My physical recovery had progressed remarkably. The cane was relegated to a corner, needed only on particularly challenging days. My surgical scars had faded from angry red to silvery lines that told the story of survival. My limp was barely noticeable to anyone who hadn't known me before the accident. Professional growth paralleled my personal healing. My remote work arrangement had proven so successful that Rachel offered to make it permanent, with quarterly visits to the Hartford office. My marketing campaigns consistently outperformed projections, earning recognition from industry publications, and resulting in substantial bonuses that finally eased my financial strain. Dr. Wilson, a therapist specializing in family trauma, had become an essential part of my recovery. Unlike my previous therapy in Connecticut, These sessions focused not on how to endure my family's behavior, but on how to thrive despite it. Estrangement isn't failure, she reminded me during one particularly difficult session when doubts surfaced. It's often the healthiest choice for someone who's been chronically devalued. My studio apartment, while a critical sanctuary during those first months, had begun to feel constraining as my world expanded. When Tasha from my support group mentioned needing a roommate for her 2-bedroom apartment in a quieter neighborhood, it seemed like perfect timing. Fair warning, she joked as she showed me around. I sing in the shower and stress bake at midnight, during exam weeks. As a high school English teacher, her schedule complemented my work-from-home routine perfectly. Moving day arrived exactly 7 months after my hospital escape. Charlotte organized a small crew of helpers, turning what could have been an overwhelming task into something resembling a party. As I watched these new friends carefully transporting my modest possessions, I was struck by how effortlessly they showed up for me. No conditions, no comparisons, no dog taking precedence. My new bedroom had a bay window overlooking a small park. The first night in that room, I sat on the window seat and watched darkness fall over the neighborhood, streetlights illuminating joggers and dog walkers enjoying the summer evening. For the first time since childhood, I felt something close to peace. New routines established themselves naturally. Morning coffee with Tasha before she left for school, productive work hours in our shared living room, evening walks exploring our neighborhood. Weekend outings with Charlotte and other friends who entered my life through various connections, book club members, neighbors, fellow trauma survivors. You seem different, Rachel commented during my first quarterly visit to the Hartford office. More centered? More yourself? I smiled, recognizing the truth in her observation. I am more myself, because I finally had the space to figure out who that is. The visit to Hartford had made me nervous. Would I encounter my family? Would old insecurities resurface in familiar surroundings? Instead, I found myself navigating the city with newfound confidence, even driving past my parents' neighborhood without the usual knot of anxiety tightening my chest. 8 months into my new life, I received notification that my parents had sent several packages to my old apartment. My former landlord, who had been sympathetic to my situation, forwarded the tracking numbers but not the packages themselves, allowing me to decide whether to claim them. After discussing it with Dr. Wilson, I decided not to. What could they contain that would benefit your healing? She asked practically. If it's genuine amends, they would find less materialistic ways to express that. I suspected the packages contained guilt-inducing mementos or passive-aggressive notes rather than true understanding. Letting them return to sender felt like another small act of self-protection. Around the same time, I discovered my parents had filed a missing persons report, despite knowing I had left voluntarily and was employed and in contact with colleagues. The Boston police contacted me as a courtesy, and after verifying my identity and confirming I was safe, they closed the case without revealing my location. This happens more often than you might think, the officer told me kindly. Family estrangement is complicated. We just needed to ensure you weren't in danger. The attempted intrusion into my carefully constructed new life prompted me to consult with a legal advisor about potential harassment. Kathleen Barnes, an attorney who specialized in family law and restraining orders, provided practical advice. Document everything, she recommended. Every contact attempt, every message through intermediaries. If they escalate, we'll have a paper trail to support legal intervention. With that safety net in place, I felt secure enough to venture further into rebuilding my life. I joined a local swimming club, rediscovering the sport I had once loved, before Apollo's anxiety about water led my parents to discourage my participation. In the rhythmic strokes and regulated breathing, I found a moving meditation that helped process lingering grief. 9 months post-escape brought my final reconstructive surgery to address lingering complications from the accident. Tasha took time off work to drive me to the hospital and bring me home afterward, sitting with me through the night when pain made sleep impossible. Her unconditional support threw into sharp relief what had been missing from my blood relations. "This is what family is supposed to do," she said simply when I tried to express my gratitude. "Show up when it matters." As my physical recovery reached its conclusion, career opportunities expanded. A major client specifically requested me as their account lead, necessitating a team working under my direction. I found myself managing 5 junior marketers, drawing on my own experiences to create a supportive work environment that valued each contributor. "Your team has the highest satisfaction scores in the company," Rachel noted during our quarterly review. "And the best retention rate. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." What I was doing, I realized, was precisely the opposite of what my parents had done, seeing each person as an individual with unique value rather than ranking them in a hierarchy of worthiness. At the 1-year mark since my accident, I received an unexpected email from Jessica. Unlike her previous message, this one seemed almost conciliatory. "Parents are distraught. Apollo isn't doing well without you. Maybe time to come home?" The message revealed everything I needed to know about their unchanged perspective. I was still being valued only for how my absence affected others, particularly the dog. My response was brief but firm. "I am home. Please respect my boundaries." I celebrated my 1-year freedom anniversary with a weekend trip to Cape Cod, accompanied by Tasha, Charlotte, and 2 other close friends. Standing on the beach watching sunrise paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, I felt profound gratitude for the painful journey that had led to this moment of genuine belonging. "To Olivia," Charlotte toasted at dinner that evening, raising her glass, "who taught us all what courage really looks like." As the 2nd year of my new life began, an industry conference in Chicago presented both professional opportunity and potential challenge. My parents lived just 2 hours from the city, and the event would be publicized in marketing circles they might monitor given their ongoing search efforts. After careful consideration and discussion with my support system, I decided to attend. "I can't organize my life around avoiding them forever," I reasoned, "and I won't sacrifice my career to fear." With renewed confidence and hard-won strength, I packed my bags for Chicago, prepared for whatever might come, including the possibility of a long-overdue confrontation. The Chicago Marriott buzzed with marketing professionals networking in small clusters throughout the massive convention center. Name badges swung from lanyards, coffee cups balanced precariously alongside portfolios, and the atmosphere crackled with ambition and opportunity. I straightened my blazer before stepping onto the stage for my presentation on digital marketing innovations, scanning the audience out of habit. My heart stuttered. 3rd row, center section. Mom and Dad, looking older than I remembered, were watching me with expressions I couldn't quite decipher. Our eyes locked for a brief moment before I pulled my professional mask firmly into place and launched into my presentation. For 45 minutes, I spoke confidently about marketing strategies and consumer behavior trends, hyper-aware of my parents' steady gaze, but determined not to let their presence derail this professional accomplishment. When the audience erupted in applause at my conclusion, I allowed myself a genuine smile of pride. As attendees approached with questions and business cards, I noticed my parents hanging back, uncertain. A colleague from another firm engaged me in conversation about potential collaboration, and when I looked up again, they had disappeared. Relief and disappointment mingled in equal measure. Had they come all this way just to observe me from a distance? Was that bizarre encounter the extent of our reckoning? My question was answered that evening when I entered the hotel restaurant for dinner and saw them seated at a corner table, clearly waiting. Dad raised his hand in a hesitant wave when our eyes met. After a moment's deliberation, I approached their table. "Hello," I said simply, my voice steadier than I had expected. "Olivia," Mom breathed, her eyes drinking in the sight of me. "You look wonderful. May we buy you dinner?" Dad asked, gesturing to the empty chair at their table. I considered declining, walking away, preserving the clean break I had worked so hard to establish. But curiosity, and a sense that this confrontation was necessary for complete healing, won out. "I'll give you 30 minutes, I said, taking the seat, but maintaining the straight-backed posture Dr. Wilson and I had practiced for this potential moment. An uncomfortable silence descended as we studied each other. Mom looked thinner, new lines etched around her eyes. Dad's hair had gone completely gray. They seemed smaller somehow, less imposing than the parents who had loomed so large in my internal landscape. "How did you know I would be here?" I asked. "Finally." "Your old colleague Maya mentioned the conference when we ran into her at the grocery store," Dad admitted. "We didn't plan this exactly, but when we realized you'd be so close—" "Your presentation was extremely impressive," Mom interjected. "Everyone was captivated." "Thank you," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. The server arrived to take our order, providing a momentary reprieve from the tension. Once alone again, Dad cleared his throat. "Olivia, we need to apologize for what exactly?" I asked when he trailed off uncertainly. "For choosing a dog over your critically injured daughter? For missing every important moment of my life? For making me feel worthless for 26 years? They exchanged uncomfortable glances. "We never meant to make you feel that way," Mom protested weakly. "We love all our children equally." "Apollo is not your child," I stated flatly. "And no, you didn't love us equally. Not even close." Dad's expression tightened. "This past year has been incredibly difficult for us, Olivia. The not knowing if you were safe, the worry, the questions from friends and family. Jessica has been devastated." I noted with bitter amusement that even their description of suffering centered themselves rather than concern for me. "I'm curious. Did you ever consider that your behavior might have consequences? That eventually I would stop accepting scraps of attention while you lavished love on Jessica and her dog? You've always been so independent, so capable," Mom said, as if this justified their neglect. "Jessica and Apollo needed us more." "I needed you too," I replied quietly. I just stopped showing it because it never made any difference. Our entrees arrived, though none of us showed much interest. In eating, I pushed salmon around my plate while formulating the words I had imagined saying for over a year. "I nearly died," I said finally, looking them each in the eye. "And you chose not to come to the hospital because Jessica was walking her dog. There's no explanation that makes that okay." Before they could respond, a commotion at the restaurant entrance drew our attention. Jessica was scanning the room, Apollo improbably at her side wearing his fake therapy dog vest. When she spotted us, she marched over, trailing disapproving looks from the restaurant staff. "I knew it!" she exclaimed loudly. "Secret family meeting without me." "Jessica, please lower your voice," Dad requested, looking mortified as heads turned in our direction. "No!" Jessica's voice rose further. "You both promised we would approach Olivia together when we found her. Apollo and I have been sitting in the car for hours waiting for you." I stood up, suddenly certain that this circus was not conducive to the resolution I sought. "This was a mistake. I need to go." "Don't you dare walk away again." Jessica grabbed my arm. "Do you have any idea what you've done to this family? Apollo developed stress-induced alopecia because of you." With calm deliberation, I removed her hand from my arm. "Jessica, this is exactly why I left. Nothing about me or my needs matters in this family. Even now, you're more concerned about your dog's fur than the fact that I nearly died and rebuilt my entire life alone." "That was your choice," she spat. "You chose to run away rather than appreciate everything we've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me?" I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. Jessica seemed momentarily taken aback by the question. We're family," she finally sputtered, as if that single fact superseded all else. "Family is supposed to show up for each other," I replied. "Family is supposed to care when one member is critically injured. Family is supposed to love unconditionally without ranking members in order of importance, with a dog at the top of the list. My parents watched this exchange in uncomfortable silence. Apollo, seemingly oblivious to the human drama, had settled, under the table, occasionally nudging Jessica's hand for attention. "If you want any relationship with me going forward," I continued, addressing all three of them, "these are my conditions: respect for my boundaries, acknowledgement of the harm, done, and no more prioritizing a dog over human family members. I won't be erased or diminished anymore." "That's ridiculous," Jessica scoffed. "You can't set conditions on family." "Actually, I can," I corrected her gently. "That's what I've learned this past year. I get to decide who has access to my life and under what terms." I turned to my stunned parents. "I'm staying at this hotel until Thursday. If you're interested in a relationship that isn't completely one-sided, you know where to find me. But I won't chase your approval anymore, and I won't pretend the past never happened." With that, I placed my napkin on the table, left enough cash to cover my untouched meal, and walked away with steady steps. Behind me, I could hear Jessica's continued protestations and my parents' hushed attempts to calm her. Back in my hotel room, I called Charlotte, who had been on standby for emotional support. "How did it go?" she asked immediately. "Exactly as expected," I replied, surprised to find I felt more relief than distress. "Jessica made it about Apollo, Mom and Dad made it about their suffering, and I set boundaries." "I'm proud of you," Charlotte said warmly. "That took incredible strength." The following day, I threw myself into conference activities, networking with industry peers and attending workshops that genuinely interested me. By evening, I had collected promising contacts and potential job offers in cities across the country, each representing possible new chapters in my continuing story. As I returned to my room that night, the hotel receptionist handed me an envelope. "This was left for you earlier," she explained. Inside was a handwritten note from my mother. "We're staying at the Holiday Inn 3 blocks away. No Jessica, no Apollo, just us. If you're willing, we'd like to talk tomorrow. Text this number, if you can meet." I sat on the edge of my bed, weighing the invitation. Was it worth reopening the wound that had finally begun to heal cleanly? Or was this an essential step in my journey? After consulting with Dr. Wilson via phone, I decided to meet them one final time. "Go in with clear boundaries and realistic expectations," she advised. "This is for your closure, not to fulfill any fantasy of the perfect reconciliation." The following afternoon, I met my parents in a quiet cafe near the convention center. True to their word, they came alone. "Thank you for agreeing to see us," Dad began awkwardly. "I want to be clear," I said before they could continue. "I'm not here to sweep everything under the rug or pretend the past doesn't matter. I'm here because I'm curious if you're finally ready to listen." To my surprise, Mom reached across the table and placed her hand atop mine. "We are," she said simply. "It took losing you completely to realize what we'd done." For the next hour, I spoke without interruption about my experience growing up as the less favored child, about the hospital abandonment, and about the challenging but fulfilling journey of the past year. I described the pain of not being seen, the loneliness of achieving without recognition, and the eventual liberation of building a life centered on self-respect rather than perpetual disappointment. When I finished, Mom was openly weeping. Dad stared into his coffee cup, visibly struggling with emotion. "I don't know if we can fix this," Mom admitted finally. "But I want to try. I miss my daughter. I've missed having parents who valued me," I replied honestly. "But I need to know. What would be different? Because I won't return to the old dynamic. I can't." "We've started therapy," Dad said unexpectedly. "Both as a couple and individually. After you left, everything fell apart. We had to face some hard truths about our family patterns." "And Jessica?" I asked skeptically. Mom sighed heavily. "Jessica refuses to acknowledge any problem. She's actually living independently with Apollo. Now, our relationship with her has become strained since we began questioning our family dynamics. This revelation surprised me. The golden child was experiencing consequences too. I can't promise instant forgiveness, I told them. But I'm willing to consider very limited contact moving forward. Phone calls initially, perhaps eventual visits with clear time boundaries. But at the first sign of the old patterns returning, I'll walk away again, this time permanently. That's more than we deserve, Dad acknowledged. But we'll take it. As we parted ways, Mom handed me a small package. Just some photos I thought you might want, she explained. No pressure to keep them. That night in my hotel room, I unwrapped a collection of childhood photographs I'd never seen before. Me winning swimming competitions, graduating, moments I thought had gone completely undocumented. They had noticed, at least enough to capture the images, even if they hadn't shown up in the ways that mattered. 2 days later, I boarded a plane back to Boston, back to the life I had built from scratch, back to the people who had become my chosen family. As the aircraft lifted off, I felt the weight of the past year settling into something lighter, more manageable. My healing journey had traveled from the initial physical trauma of the car accident through the deeper wounds of family dysfunction, through the painful but necessary separation, to the gradual rebuilding of a life centered on self-worth rather than external validation. The scars, both physical and emotional, would always remain, but they had transformed from sources of pain into markers of resilience. In my apartment that evening, surrounded by friends celebrating my successful conference presentation, I realized the most profound truth of my journey. Sometimes the people who should love us most fail us completely, but that failure reflects their limitations, not our worthiness. To setting boundaries and finding peace, Tasha toasted, unknowingly echoing the words from my first virtual Thanksgiving after leaving. I raised my glass, grateful for the painful clarity that had ultimately led me home, not to the place where I was born, but to the life I had chosen, filled with people who saw and valued me exactly as I was. Have you ever had to walk away from something familiar, even if it was hurting you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember that you deserve to be valued and seen, just as you are. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and self-discovery. Thank you for walking alongside me today. And remember, family is who shows up, not just who shares. Your DNA